One Hell of a Team by Neon Zangetsu, Chapter 2, A Just Reward. They say rivals bring out the best in us. Be kind to my son, will you? He needs a friend. I'll do my best to live up to your expectations, sir. I shan't let you down. Good girl, you're going to be amazing someday. A discussion. A just reward. She didn't want to let go. Pyrrha knew what was coming next and steeled her heart against it. Her palm betrayed her like the girl she was. She couldn't bring herself to let go of Naruto's hand. It was warm and soft in hers. More than that, his presence gave her strength. She didn't want to bid him goodbye, even for a moment. Truly she didn't. But she had to. She told herself she would see him again momentarily when the trophies were presented to each of them, but the knowledge proved cold comfort. Even from here, she could sense Father's gaze searing in her back, feel his fury like a physical thing. He wasn't angry with her, he was livid. She'd brought dishonor to the Nico's name, her defeat so clear-cut that it could not be denied. It wouldn't stop him from trying. She knew he would out of spite, if nothing else. There was no end to his pettiness. If he couldn't pressure the judges, then perhaps he'd seek it in court, or claim some manner of foul play. He would seek to slander the Uzumaki's name, drag his family into the mud, and bleed them dry of the lien they'd won, unless she stopped him. This was her battle, and she had to face it. Alone, if she did so with Naruto at her side, she knew she would doubt herself forever. And so Pyrrha made her excuse to her rival, plucked her hand from his. She didn't want to, retrieved her weaponry, and hasted into the changing rooms. From there it was a simple matter of biding her time until Father confronted her, as she knew he would. His pride demanded nothing else, the same pride that had ruined their family and driven Mother away. Her lips fell into a frown at the thought. Anger boiled just beneath the surface of her skin, for the tide that left her blood feeling like a bloody bubble bath. For once, Pyrrha didn't tamp it down. She let it flow through her veins, use it to burn away her dread and fill her heart with defiance. She had the feeling she needed in the moment. In the meantime, she checked herself over, dusted herself down, tried to make herself look decent. She couldn't remember the last time she'd fought this hard, nor lost this badly, the last time she'd felt so free. Humming a familiar tune to herself for comfort, Pyrrha removed her circlet and unbound her hair, and shaking it loose from its ponytail to cascade down her back in a river of crimson. She tossed her hair left to right, then did so again when the weight felt odd between her shoulders. She was rather used to having it bound up, but this time she paused short of binding it up again. Green eyes peered over her shoulder, considering. Does he like girls with long hair? She said the words aloud and balked almost immediately, face gone scarlet. Ah, no, bad thoughts, treachery, treason. Pyrrha shook her head anew and continued her hasty inspection. She couldn't take her armor off, dented as it was. It needed to remain for the award ceremony. She wouldn't remove it even if she could. Each scratch and every tear served as a reminder of how far she'd come. One of her vambraces was ruined, scored, and pitted where a clawed hand scorched the metal. Maybe she'd keep it as a memento. That sounded grand. She laid her weapons out on a nearby bench and inspected them briefly. Milo simply needed a good sharpening to regain its edge, but Akuo had been badly mangled by Naruto. Anyone else would have taken one look at the ruined shield and called it a loss. Not Pyrrha. Focusing her semblance upon opposite ends of her shield, she forced it into its natural shape. Metal shrieked and bent beneath her will, drawing a wince from the girl. It would have to do for now. She could take it to a metalsmith later. Only then did she dare approach the sink and splash some water onto her face. Despite her loss, the girl stared back at her within the mirror, looked happy, despite her injuries, battered but unbroken, pleased beyond measure. Her hair was a mess in its ponytail, her face dirty and smudged. Her right eye bore a faint bruise beneath it, and her nose was bloodied where Naruto's first punch had struck. A few cuts pockmarked her left arm, where some shrapnel had lanced through her aura. Good, she hoped it left a scar. No one could call her perfect, not anymore. She wouldn't let them. Hello, me? She touched her hand to the glass and smiled at her reflection, seeing herself for the first time. Long time no see. The girl in the mirror grinned back at her. Then the door crashed open, and that smile shattered like brittle glass. Pyrrha! A new voice thundered in her ears from the hall. What is the meaning of this? She took a deep breath, schooled her face into an impassive mask, and turned to face the man she once called Daddy. Focus. She willed the word at herself. Don't stoop to his level. He'll try to drag you down. Don't let him. The meaning of what, father? Caesar Nikos was a great big bear of a man. His once handsome face, scarred the pitied by the ravages of combat. Green eyes of unpolished jade stabbed into her like a sword, framed by a close-cropped red hair and a trimmed beard. Powerful muscles bristled beneath his cobalt suit, barely contained by the dark fabric. He was a fighter through and through, towering well over 6 feet. No fat fool he. This man had cut his teeth as a huntsman in Mistral before rejoining as the kingdom's undefeated champion for decades before his retirement. Needless to say, he didn't take her sass kindly. You know of what I speak? He loomed over her, eyes flashing. What do you have to say for yourself? It was my loss today. She lifted her chin in a rare burst of defiance. I'm not sorry for it. A stern hand cracked across her face. Never say that again. Nikos never loses. She took the blow with her aura and staggered a single step backwards. Once, such a strike would have cowed her in submission. Not today. Anger emboldened Pyrrha, made her reckless. She turned the other cheek and spat blood onto his pristine white shoes. His face turned an alarming shade of puce. It suited him. But I have. Triumph escaped her in a heady rush. You can't change that. I'm not your invincible girl. Not anymore. Father bristled, and she glared right back at him, refusing to falter. To do so now would undo everything she'd said. No, she refused. I'm done, father. The words she'd longed to say for so long burst free from her now. I've had enough of this. I want to stay with mother. Nonsense. His eyes bulged, spade-like jaw setting itself in a scowl. You will do as you are told. We will wipe this stain from our name and proceed as we have before. Stain? Anger turned to wrath. Naruto wasn't the stain. He was just a boy, and she knew full well how her father operated. Who are you to call him that? He defeated me fair and square. Did he? That will be for the courts of Mistral to decide. His smile, slight as it was, proved telling. The court he had a hand in. I'll have a panel of experts deriddle that blonde buffoon within the month. You will back their testimony with your own, of course. That smile turned ugly. He used a trick of some sort. He deceived you. He didn't fight fair. Worry not. We'll have your perfect record restored. His words made her feel small. No, she wouldn't go back to the lonely life. You will do as you are told, daughter. Pyrrha squared her shoulders. I will not. Treacherous chit. His arm swung down at her again. You dare defy me? A hand caught his wrist and wrenched it back. It wasn't hers. I'm sorry. I couldn't help but overhear you. Pyrrha spun to face her unexpected ally, and startled as someone appeared between them in a swirl of leaves. At this angle she couldn't see the man's face, for this was most certainly a man. With any real clarity, she was too busy looking up at a broad back, clad in a strange blue-green uniform she didn't recognize, over which he'd thrown a red and white cloak. He stood tall in the face of her father's fury, one warrior to another. Caesar struggled in his grasp, unable to escape. For all his fire and fury and height, he could not wriggle free. Surely you didn't mean to hit that poor girl just now? Her savior's voice was soft with velvet mockery, gentle yet patronizing at the same time. Our father would never do such a thing. Bones creaked under his firm grasp as aura trickled away. You are a father, aren't you? He squeezed, and father snarled in pain. Well, I'd like an answer, Caesar bristled. Unhand me at once. No, I don't think I will. Still smiling, the stranger pivoted to look at her. You must be Pyrrha. He turned, favoring her with a fatherly smile. My son was looking for you. Said you ran off in a hurry. Now that Pyrrha got a good look at him, he seemed strangely familiar. He looked just like Naruto, but far older, sterner, weathered, and careworn. Gentle blue eyes gazed back at her serenely, framed by long blonde bangs and that dashing grin, yet lacking whiskered cheeks. Curious. No, never mind that. She recognized him from the stands because she knew his face. Oh gods, this was Naruto's father. She could see the resemblance, clear as day. Her face warmed. Oh my, this was what Naruto would become when he was older. Then maybe she didn't mind. Gah, not again. Bad brain, behave. And as for you, those angry azure orbs swept to the side to regard her father. You disappoint me. Caesar flinched as a strange ink-like symbol burned itself into his palm. I've marked you now, the blonde informed him primly. The next time you raise a hand to her will be the last time you have hands. That strange, eerie smile never once wavered. I am a patient and tolerant man, but if you hurt her, or Sage forbid, try to drag my boy's name through the mud. His hand twisted. Caesar screamed and dropped to a knee as a bone popped in his arm. Well, the blonde tittered, I'm sure you understand. This isn't over. Yes, it is. The blonde flicked her hand before the man's face and released his hold upon him. Pyrrha felt something stir in the air as he spoke. Move along now. The Nikos patriarch stormed off, cradling his wrist and muttering curses. Cretin, you'll rue this day. I'll see you in court. I wouldn't do that, the blue-eyed man called after him. Andrea might turn you into a toad first. Caesar moved just a little faster after that. Something hardened in Pyrrha as she glared at the retreating back of the man she once loved. He hadn't always been like this. Once upon a time he'd been a better man. Before the accident, before the drinking, before everything. He wasn't cold, wasn't cruel. She remembered a man she called Daddy, a jolly fellow who gave her piggyback rides, a man who tucked her in at night with a cup of hot cocoa and read her bedtime stories, a man who treated her sister like gold. Where had that man gone? My apologies. The blonde offered her a warm smile as Caesar skulked away. I'm a bit overprotective when it comes to kids these days, even if they aren't my own. I hope I didn't frighten you. No, it's fine. Pyrrha stepped back to regard him. And you are? I didn't give you my name, did I? A hint of genuine confusion flashed through his eyes. It vanished as he laughed and scratched the back of his head. I'm sorry, my memory isn't what it used to be. I've been getting horrible headaches lately, an illness of some sort. Naruto had mentioned as much, worrying. Just like that, he offered her his hand. You can call me Minato. She accepted it. Pyrrha. Be good to my son, won't you, Pyrrha? Minato laughed and tousled her hair like the proud father he was. Unlike me, he was a newborn when we first came to this world. He doesn't know how to control himself. There was something about the way he said that bit, something that concerned her. He's still learning. I think you're the first friend he's made since we came here. His smile became just a bit more genuine. Although, well, it seems he takes after me in other ways. Pyrrha tilted her head. This world, I'm sorry, sir. I don't understand. You will someday. Blue eyes twinkled with mischief and he gave her a nudge. Go on. He's waiting for you out there. Claim your prize. Her lips pursed in a confused frown, not quite comprehending. Do you mean the trophy? Minato chortled softly and pulled away. Sure. You can believe that if you like. She shot out of the room like an arrow loosed from a bow. Oh, hey, you're oh! And Pyrrha's hand was warm, her fingers threading with his. In hindsight, it seemed a strange thing to focus on, and yet it was all Naruto could think of. He wasn't sure why she was going this far, but he certainly wasn't about to complain. The moment she came back, she'd taken one look at him and latched on for all she was worth. Fine by him, he wasn't about to push her away. Not now, not when she looked like this. Together they stood in the waiting room, prepared themselves for the announcement that was sure to come. She seemed oddly skittish about that. For reasons he didn't understand, it didn't matter that she'd lost. Not to him. Silence wrapped itself around them like a blanket, but a warm one, safe, quiet, comfortable. Pyrrha wriggled out of it first and turned to face him in the dim light. I met your father. Her voice brushed his ears in a whisper. Naruto perked up. You did? She smiled at him. He's nice, if a little odd. Heat rose in the boy's cheeks. Yeah, he hasn't been quite the same since Mom died. Her face went chalk white at the fox paws. I'm sorry, I didn't know. Nah, it's fine. He waved her down. She passed away when I was little. I don't really remember her all that well. His head tilted as he considered her anew. A small smile tugged at his whiskered cheeks. I think she would have liked you. For some reason, that made Pyrrha sputter. He wondered why. Dad really was trying his best, poor guy. Minato was terribly overworked these days. He'd practically raised him on his own, despite having others to look after. Sure, his godfather lent a hand from time to time, as did his uncles and aunts, but they were busy these days. Jiraiya most of all. He couldn't be there every second of the day. Something about a spy network, strange happenings, and other odd terms that sailed right over his own little head. Meh, this world was weird. Naruto didn't mind over much. He'd finally found a friend that was good enough for him. The grown-ups could handle the rest, couldn't they? A voice rang overhead, interrupting his thoughts. Will the final 3 contestants please make their way to the podium? Suppose that's us, he shrugged into the silence that followed. Ready? Pyrrha bobbed her head. I'll have to be, won't I? She pushed the door open and she followed after him, squinting against the light. Her footsteps matched his, not in front of or behind him, but beside him. The gesture wasn't lost on Naruto, if only because she still hadn't let go of his hand. Good. His fingers tightened against hers. A small childish part of him warmed to the idea. He didn't want to let go either. He wanted to hold on forever and ever. Nothing wrong with that, right? The lights flared anew as they walked, forcing them to squint even further. Above and around them, the crowd roared their approval. Together they climbed the podium, him taking first place and she becoming second, just a touch below. And to his right, some stranger came from another door to claim third on his left. He took her in at a quick glance, idly noting her dark hair and strangely bright eyes. He threw a half-hearted nod their way and received one in return. Nothing more. His attention was already elsewhere. Even from here, he could feel angry eyes leering down at him. He'd made some enemies today. Of course, he'd had them. He'd bested their invincible girl. Bah! Public opinion could go suck a lemon for all he cared. Thanks for waiting. Brandishing their microphone like a sword, a tournament official stepped before them to address the audience. We had quite the showing here tonight, both arms spread far and wide, encompassing everyone in a single gesture. It's not every day we crown a new champion. Everyone, put your hands together for Naruto Uzumaki. And tepid applause greeted him. Beside him, Pyrrha wilted just a little. Naruto wasn't having it. Ha! Instead, he let out a triumphant cry and hoisted her arm high with his. Pyrrha's face flamed to match her lovely red hair. What are you doing? Everyone went ballistic before their response had been lukewarm at best. Now he felt his teeth vibrate from the united howl that followed. For in raising their hands, fingers still linked, he'd unknowingly drawn attention to their linked hands. That wasn't his intention, of course. He just wanted to show solidarity. Pity for him, the crowd took it the wrong way. Celebrating our friendship. What else? He grinned back at her, shouting to make himself heard over the noise. Seems appropriate, don't you think? Green eyes fluttered in a quick blink. Not your victory? Nope. He grinned. She frowned. But why? Nope. He shook his head. Her lips pursed in a frown. Surely you... Nope. Naruto smacked his lips in an audible pop. It was enough to finally crack the redhead's facade and draw a rare laugh from her. You don't do anything by halves, do you? Nah, he waved his free hand. Wasn't raised that way. By contrast, the trophy he received proved something of a non-factor. While much larger than the ones Pyrrha and the third place girl received, it was surprisingly light in his hand, all garish and gold, studded with sapphires and rubies, and etched into the shape of a triumphant huntsman, sword pointed towards the heavens. He didn't much care. The real prize was the money. It would pay for Dad's problems and then some. Might even be enough to keep his friends and family going for another few years. More than that, this would make a statement. So, champion, he wasn't prepared when the officiator shoved the microphone in his face. Would you like to say a few words? Naruto balked, his courage abandoning him for a moment. He glanced at Pyrrha. She shrugged hopelessly. Right, a speech. How bad could it be? Reluctantly, he let go of her fingers and accepted the mic in his now free hand. Then the crowd quieted, curious to hear his words. This isn't just my victory. He spoke slowly and carefully, reining his eagerness in, just as he'd been taught. And I wasn't always this strong. A slow shake of his head captured their attention. I only got this far today because of my dad. Minato Namikaze trained me. There it was, hook-baited. He made me what I am today, and he can do the same for you. You probably don't know him. His words echoed out into the stands as he hefted his trophy for all to see. The light caught it, casting dazzling shadows across his face. But you will. He's awesome. Nobody can beat him. Feel free to try. An unspoken challenge for good measure. The gauntlet flung down, just waiting to be picked up. Just like Uncle Obito taught him. Give a man a fish and he would eat for a day. Teach him how to fish and he'd feed himself for a lifetime. Naruto couldn't quite keep the smile from his face. He'll be opening the Konoha preparatory gym next month in downtown Vale for aspiring huntsmen and huntresses. First day's free. He could have sworn he heard Auntie Ren laugh in the stands. A confused murmur greeted his words, and he used it to full advantage. I'm not good at explaining technical stuff like rates and all that bit. So be sure to ask him after this. That's him up there, by the way. He stabbed a finger into the stands, and sure enough, the cameras followed his gesture, light swinging into the audience where a certain someone had just sat down. He'll answer all your questions. Oh, and ladies, he's single. Minato choked, not missing a beat. Naruto pivoted before anyone could pounce. But as I already said, this isn't just my victory. An arm flung itself out, the thumb stabbing over his shoulder. My opponent deserves just as much praise here as me. He heard Pyrrha hiss in soft surprise behind him, but bulled on despite the noise. She's a real warrior, not some invincible girl. Not to me. She's just Pyrrha, you know. I look forward to fighting her again next year, although, he chuckled, rubbing the back of his head with his good arm. She'll probably knock me on my ass next time if I'm not careful. Pyrrha made a garbled noise, realizing what he intended. And quick as a flash, Naruto spun on one heel. So, let's hear it for Pyrrha. She made a wild grab for his wrist and tried to say something, but the roar of the crowd and their applause swallowed her words whole. Some rose to their feet, others stomped out of rhythm. A mighty chant went up, and Naruto was grateful for the noise. It hid their words, so he spoke for her. Indeed, Naruto said the first thing that came to mind. So, you want to get some ramen after this? She laughed again. I'd like to. Previews. Mwahaha! Brilliant! Best damn nephew ever! All according to plan. He doubled over as an elbow slammed into his ribs. Don't cackle, Obito. You sound like a villain. Damn it, Kakashi. Naruto sputtered as a cloud of rose petals slapped him in the face. And time. Minato hit the stopwatch as she skittled to a halt. Well done, Miss Rose. That's a new record. His son coughed. What the hell are they feeding that girl? Pyrrha watched intently. He laughed and raised his fist. Round 2. Pyrrha flew at him with a grin. She'd fallen in love. The notion nearly caused Pyrrha to miss a step in the hall. It was only her ironclad self-control that kept her walking forward. She didn't know when, where, how, or why, only that it had happened over the last year or so. Once such a realization would have startled her and galled her at the very thought. Now, a small smile plucked at the corner of her mouth. Love, that sounded rather grand. A Nikos conquered, after all. All right then. Minato exhaled in a sharp, angry breath as he coughed into his fist. You have my attention. He straightened and whipped a thin line of blood from the corner of his mouth. I hope it's what you wanted. It was not. Blue eyes seared red. His adversary saw little more than a flash of gold before they died. End of chapter 2.